Devil May Cry 3 is an interesting title, mainly because of everything that led up to it becoming the game it is. Devil May Cry 1 was a unique and interesting experiment that saw huge critical success, whereas Devil May Cry 2 was a big mistake for Capcom. Despite this, Itsuno and the team behind DMC2 were given a second chance. Itsuno-san said himself that he wanted to make Devil May Cry 3 because he did not want to be known as the guy that made Devil May Cry 2. DMC3 was the last chance for the series to reach its true potential. If DMC3 was a failure, then Capcom would have definitely pulled the plug on this series. But, fortunately enough, Devil May Cry 3 was both a commercial and critical success. It's the reason this franchise still exists today, in fact. It redefined the action game genre and established what a Devil May Cry game truly is. While DMC1 is a solid game, it was still using the Resident Evil formula. So DMC3 was the first game in the series to have its own unique formula that helped define the game and the series itself. But it has also been over 15 years since this game released, and being that it's one of my favourite childhood classics, I think I should take a look back on this silly game and see what made it so awesome to begin with, and if it's still awesome all these years later. So, without further ado, here's Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition. DMC3 Special Edition offers two characters with very different playstyles and design. Dante is the star of the show, so I'll start with him. Dante is a lot different than he was in previous games. He shares elements, such as delay combos and similar moves, but as a whole the character is very different. A new element added to this game is the style system. This gives Dante 4 different styles that completely change the way you face encounters, and have their own learning curve and skill ceiling. The more you use these styles, they level up, giving new moves with them and often completely changing the way you'll use them in combat. Trickster is the least interesting, but is still useful and very fun. At the start of the game, most players will likely want to use Trickster over the other styles because Trickster sort of acts like a dodge button at that point in the game, and it'll help you dodge attacks and get used to the enemies and how they work when you don't have a grip on things yet. But after you've leveled up Trickster, you can teleport to enemies and use up to 3 tricks at a time. It goes from being a simple dodge button to a tool used to reposition yourself, dart around groups of enemies, or close the distance between you and another enemy. And what's cool is that whenever you teleport to an enemy, you teleport just on top of them, which is perfect for jump cancelling, where you can jump off of an enemy. Jump cancelling resets your gravity and how many moves you can use while in the air every time you do it. Overall, whilst being the least interesting style in the game, it is still plenty useful and has plenty of unique and interesting uses once you get the hang of it. Swordmaster is really awesome. It takes advantage of your melee weapons and gives them new moves. When only using the attack button, the number of attacks you can perform is somewhat limited and usually involves delay combos. Whereas Swordmaster is more dependent on directional combos and gives you at least 3 new attacks. And since you use 2 weapons at once, that's a minimum of 6 new attacks you get with this style. Swordmaster is especially helpful because it gives the weapons more airborne potential as it gives more air attacks. Whilst Swordmaster isn't needed to do air combos, it makes doing air combos much easier and more interesting since you can be much more creative with it thanks to all the new moves you have. Swordmaster has a unique learning curve to it as well, as it goes from just giving more variety to combos to being able to string moves together. And since you can choose any combination of the 5 weapons in the game, that gives you over 30 different combos to string together with enemies, just with one style. Not counting regular attacks or gun attacks, which bump that number up. Master and Swordmaster allows you to pull off godlike combos such as this. Gunslinger is basically Swordmaster but for guns instead, and behaves somewhat similar. The style button gives new attacks to the guns, and they change depending on which direction you push the stick in. They even have air combo potential as well, and allow you to do Rainstorm, one of the coolest moves in any video game. Gunslinger is also similar to Swordmaster in its learning curve and depth, but since it's guns, it acts completely differently than melee weapons do and changes the way you fight enemies. Gunslinger gameplay is nothing like Swordmaster gameplay. But then we get to my favourite style, Royal Guard. Royal Guard acts as a block parry style. Holding block reduces the damage you take from attacks and keeps your style. However, some attacks you can't just block. If you press the style button at the right time when an enemy attacks, you'll parry it, giving you style and avoiding all damage. Sometimes it'll even stagger the enemy. Whenever you parry attacks, it'll fill up the Royal Guard meter, which allows you to disperse the damage thrown at your parries back onto the enemies. If you do it at the right time during an enemy's attack, then you'll do a Royal Release which will double the damage. This means that you'll be a god against bosses once you get the timing down on their attacks, and regular enemies will bow down at your feet begging for mercy as you Royal Release them all. Royal Guard goes from being a simple block button to being a weapon that can kill a god. Royal Guard is by far the best style in the game. It may not be as complex or as deep as Swordmaster or Gunslinger, but if you can master every enemy attack in this game, then you are basically untouchable and the enemies kind of kill themselves at that point. Plus, once you level it up, there is this one move where Dante does a Neo pose and then puts a shield in front of him, which blocks any and all attacks from the front. It even gives you some health back. It's not overpowered though, you can be hit from any other direction, meaning it doesn't really work in a crowd of enemies, and it doesn't give you any style points. It's purely for defense. But to be honest, that's the best part of this style. It can be used for both defensive and offensive purposes, making it extremely useful in pretty much any type of battle. Royal Guard is the best style, period. There are two extra styles that you obtain in the game, Quicksilver and Doppelganger. Quicksilver slows down time and enemies whilst you move in real time, similar to Bayonetta's Witch Time, and Doppelganger summons a shadow version of yourself to fight enemies. These are very powerful and very cool to play around with. However, they do drain your Devil Trigger meter, so you can't just spam them. Overall, the style system is probably the best addition to Devil May Cry 3. It adds so much depth, complexity, variety, and replayability to the game. What's also great is that all styles are useful to beginners, whilst also having a learning curve and skill ceiling worth striving towards. But the weapons are the main thing you'll be using in Devil May Cry 3, so if they aren't good, then the style system won't mean much. Luckily, they're pretty great. Rebellion is a sword that is quick and controllable. You have an easy way of launching enemies up into the air, you have some charge-up attacks like Drive that offer a risk versus reward attack. It's generally good for most situations. However, it doesn't have many AoE attacks, and thus doesn't deal with crowds the best. But it is great for charging straight into battle, and it does a decent amount of damage, and has pretty good speed. Cerberus is awesome. It has the fastest moveset out of all the weapons, but it also does the least damage. Cerberus is great at fighting enemies, whilst also given defensive options. Some of the attacks have nearly 360 degree reach, and one of them straight up makes you invincible when you do it. It's also great for parrying attacks from other enemies or bosses. As said, the weapon itself doesn't do much damage, but it works great for stringing together combos since it can land hits on a group of enemies super easily. Unfortunately, it only has one way to launch enemies up into the air, and you can't do it without Swordmaster, so it is mostly a ground weapon. Though the attack in the air is useful, because it isn't like the other attacks from other weapons where it either immediately brings you down or immediately brings the enemy down. Instead, it pushes you both down at a 90-degree angle, which is great because it means air combos with this weapon are possible without Swordmaster. Acne and Rudra are two swords that have fire and wind properties, which makes them very good at AoE attacks. What differs them from the other sword Rebellion is that the attacks are slower and have more horizontal range, whereas Rebellion is more precise and straightforward. Best example is the Stinger move. With Rebellion, Dante goes straight into the enemy, whereas with Agni and Rudra, Dante runs up to them. The Swordmaster attacks are great for juggling a group of enemies and pushing them back, and it does a lot of damage. Plus, Agni and Rudra talk to you whilst you do the attacks, so it adds a bit of fun to the way you play as well. Overall, an amazing weapon. It's great that the game has two sword-related weapons, but neither play like the other. Even having both equipped at the same time provides a very unique experience, as they both have unique roles. Navan is the coolest thing ever. It's the most complex weapon in the game, but also the most satisfying to use. It has melee attacks that do a lot of damage, AoE attacks that can juggle enemies, and it can shoot bats at enemies, so it's kinda like a gun sometimes. Most of the attacks are charge-based and thus works as a risk versus reward weapon, where the attacks are powerful and give you a lot of style points, but it leaves you open to an attack more than any other weapon in the game. You can also use it in Devil Trigger, where you can fly and rain down lightning on enemies or fly into them like a drill. These abilities were in Devil May Cry 1 with Alistair, but in Devil May Cry 3 with all of its mechanics, these mesh together perfectly. Stringing together combos by playing sick guitar riffs is one of the coolest things I've ever done in a video game. It also heals you faster in Devil Trigger than other weapons do. Beowulf is a weapon that encourages slow, precise, and charged strikes, though the attacks can be spammed. It does an insane amount of damage but leaves you open for an attack. It's somewhat similar to Navan in that sense, but Beowulf only focuses on precise attacks rather than AoE attacks. It only has one AoE attack anyway. Great weapon, and goes in hand with pretty much any other weapon in the game, and it's great for combo strings too. So, all the melee weapons in the game are amazing. They all have strengths and weaknesses, they all have a unique function, and they all work well when combined with another weapon. So the weapon selection is great. But that's only half the weapons, because the game also features firearms. Ebony and Ivory is the standard gun which fires fast and does decent damage. It's great for juggling enemies or extending combos. Gunslinger makes it even more useful as you can fire in any direction to blow enemies back, and Rainstorm makes it useful for stunning and damaging enemies on the ground whilst in the air. The shotgun is great for knockback attacks. It does decent damage and blows enemies back. Gunslinger is very effective as it can do a powerful stinger and blow a crowd of enemies back too. Combo videos have put the knockback to great use for repositioning, so there is a learning curve to this weapon as well. Artemis is really only useful with Gunslinger. The standard attack has a charge up and can target multiple enemies at a time, but Dante stops every time he fires it, and it doesn't do much damage or give you many style points. The Gunslinger attacks are useful for crowd control and stuns, but I don't think it's great design that a weapon requires a certain style to be useful. Ebony and Ivory and the shotgun are more limited without Gunslinger, but they're still useful and fun without it. So I would say Artemis is a weak weapon overall. Spiral suffers the same problem, in that the gun is really only useful when using Gunslinger. Spiral's attacks have the furthest range of any gun and do the most damage. Ricochet attacks are really good for crowd control, but just like Artemis, you can't move while firing. The overall issue with these two guns is that you have to use Gunslinger for them to be any use. So if you want to use any other style with these guns, then they're going to pretty much be useless or just slow you down. The Gunslinger style is meant to enhance the weapon, not be the weapon. Kalina Ran is awesome. It does a lot of damage and is great for dealing with groups of enemies. Gunslinger adds attacks which helps with dealing with crowds even more. Even against bosses, these attacks do quite a bit of damage. So overall, it's a cool weapon and is useful for pretty much anything. You can't fire it whilst in the air and you can't move while firing, so it's not overpowered. Though I do wish you could fire it in the air like you can in future games. Overall, the firearms are okay. Ebony and Ivory, the shotgun, and Kalina Ran are great, but Artemis and Spiral are really only good if you have the appropriate style. So there isn't much reason to use them. But the weapon selection overall is really great and works really well with Dante. There is so many different combinations of weapons you can use for different playstyles, and when you factor in the style system and all the different combinations you can use for those weapons, it adds so much fun to the game. as well as having a good learning curve and skill ceiling worth striving towards, whilst also being good for beginners. So yeah, Dante's an amazingly designed character. He has so many tools without being overwhelming, and encourages skill and mastery, but you don't have to be perfect at the game to have fun. So yeah, Dante's amazing. It's no wonder why he's considered one of the best hack-and-slash characters ever made, and why people continue to make combo videos with him over 15 years later. But, while Dante is amazing enough to carry a whole game, Capcom added Vergil as a playable character in the 2006 re-release, Special Edition. Right off the bat, Vergil has 3 weapons: Yamato, Beowulf, and Force Edge. Beowulf behaves almost the same way it does with Dante, but it doesn't have the charge feature and has extra moves that make the weapon more about speed than slow and charge strikes. Force Edge acts more like a limited version of Rebellion, as it shares a lot of the same moves, though Drive has been replaced with Round Trip. Yamato is really the only unique weapon Vergil has, and it's a lot of fun. It's super fast, does a lot of damage, and has really good air combo potential. You can even perform judgment cuts with it, so it has medium range use. So the weapon selection with Vergil is great, but not unique. What differs him from Dante is just about everything else. Instead of guns, Vergil uses Summon Sword, which gets shot at enemies. You can even do this trick of summoning swords around you, though it does cost Devil Trigger. And while this is active, you can use a variety of different Summon Sword moves, so he kind of has his own version of Gunslinger. These attacks are useful for stunning enemies, blasting them with attacks, or damaging surrounding enemies. So it's a very cool and useful mechanic. Vergil only has one style, being Darkslayer, where you can teleport to enemies. It's a more advanced version of Dante's Trickster. You can just teleport to an enemy, but you can also trick up or trick down. You can even use trick down whilst on the ground, so it can be used for dodging attacks. In fact, similar to Trickster, Darkslayer has invincibility frames where you're invincible while the animation plays. While the teleport animation plays, you can't be hit. So if you get the timing for each attack down, then you can avoid any and all damage. It's also cool because the trick moves are faster than Dante, and so it's easy to keep the pace of combat going, and closing the distance between you and an enemy is super easy. Vergil is surprisingly even faster than Dante, and because of this, he can actually be a bit more fun than Dante at times. So despite being more limited than his brother, he's still just as fun and well designed. Although he isn't as well balanced, but part of the fun of Vergil is being overpowered. So the 2 playable characters are amazing to play with overall. What is also great is the style meter. Now this existed in previous games, but Devil May Cry 3 perfected it. In DMC 1 and 2, it was hard to tell how well you were doing until you hit a specific rank, or how far away from that rank you were. In DMC 3, you can see the meter fill up to your next rank, and how much more variation and taunts you need to use in your combos to get to that next rank. Plus, they added a double S and triple S rank for those players that are beyond stylish. Also, your taunts change depending on the rank you currently have, which is really cool. So far, this game sounds like a masterpiece, right? Well, while the characters themselves are pretty much perfect, everything surrounding them isn't as good. Most of my criticisms for this game come from the level design, the enemy design, and the boss design. The level design in this game ranges from good to annoying. Most of the early levels in this game are pretty good. You have plenty of combat encounters to keep you entertained, but also have some exploration to break the pace up a bit. Some of the combat arenas can suck though, like this one. There are enemies to the left and to the right that you can't see, and so you'll either get hit by them, or forget they're there and lose star rank. I don't think this camera angle was the best. I think if they set the camera by that door facing downwards, then it would have fixed it. Speaking of the camera system, it is a step up from the previous games. While DMC 3 still contains fixed camera angles, combat encounters allow you to move the camera left and right. And even then, the camera in these sections isn't necessarily a fixed camera, it's more just a camera that follows Dante. This camera is better at keeping track of the action and displaying the action. The only time a fixed camera is used in combat is when the entire action can be displayed within a single camera shot, such as here. so the problem of camera angles in DMC 1 and 2 aren't as much of a problem anymore. Though there are a couple occasions where it can still be a bit annoying, but it mostly works. Most of the time, fixed camera angles are just used for when you're exploring the castle to give some atmosphere. But even with the improved camera, there are still some really annoying combat arenas that still suck regardless. Sometimes I'll walk into a room and see the room and be like, fuck this, I'm not doing this. They only appear a few times in the game, but they are still annoying. Luckily, most of the combat arenas in this game are pretty solid. So what's wrong with the level themselves then? Well, the exploration and combat is all great, but it's when the levels try to introduce other gameplay elements where it falters, such as platforming and puzzles. The puzzles suck in this game. Mission 15 is one of the worst, since you need to go through different color combination doors to get the right items. I've played this game for longer than I can remember, so I know where all the items are and which doors to go through, but it doesn't excuse the tedium that comes with playing that mission. Mission 11 has this small part where you have to smack boxes into walls. Like, why? What fun does this add to the game? Like, yeah, it's only lasts like a minute or so, but it's still, why? I'd rather just fight enemies than just smack boxes for a minute. Mission 18 is a boss rush, and I'll explain why that sucks in a bit. Luckily, you don't have to fight all the bosses. You just make a circle on the board. But that's not really a compliment. Saying that you get to skip a shit level doesn't make the level good. Mission 19 has this stupid section where the enemies are invincible and you have to break the mirrors to kill them because, you know, not engaging with the enemies and trying to focus on something else while they try to kill me is fun. Mission 17 has some annoying platforming and a terrible boss. So yeah, some of the levels are annoying. Oddly enough, most of the annoying levels are in the third act of the game, and it's why Act 3 is my least favourite part of the game. Pretty much all of Act 1's levels, 1 to 7, are great. Act 2, 8 to 13, has like 1 or 2 annoying levels, but the rest are great. But Act 3, 14 to 20, has 4 annoying levels, leaving only 2 good ones for the final act of the game. Basically, whenever you're in combat or exploring, the game is usually great. Whenever you're doing anything other than that, the game sucks. Luckily, these annoying sections don't make up most of the game, and most of the game is the good stuff, but this still can take my enjoyment of the game down a bit. Act 3 feels like it could have had some levels removed, but they were added to lengthen the game. So yeah, DMC3's level design isn't great. The combat arenas are usually good, but everything else is poop. Next criticism for this game is the enemy design. Frankly, it kinda sucks. The 7 hells are mixed. Pride is your standard cannon fodder enemy, good for doing combos on. Envy are basically Pride, but are much harder to launch into the air and thus aren't as fun. Wrath are annoying bombs that you need to back away from and shoot. It's good for taking out a group of enemies, but it can seriously break the pace of combat sometimes. Sloth is a powered up version of Pride that can teleport and defend itself more. Still really good for doing combos on and provides a bit more of a challenge, especially in groups. Greed really messes with enemy prioritization as it spawns other enemies. Why would I kill other enemies when this guy's about? Oh, so he can spawn more enemies and negate me killing those demons. Gluttony and Lust suck because they only have 1 attack and they just keep spamming it and thus aren't interesting. Even when mixed with the other demons, they don't provide that much of a challenge and they aren't very unique. The Enigma are annoying because they fire arrows at you from a distance, and so you'll be comboing on an enemy only to get hit or have to dodge attacks coming from 50 miles away. And they'll often move away when you try and get close, and it becomes really much of a hassle to deal with them. The damned chessmen are really cool though. They are chess pieces that take turns in trying to kill you. They work like chess pieces in that they only have 1 form of attack, and thus aren't strong or interesting on their own, but in a group of other chess pieces it becomes a very engaging experience. One of my favourite parts is when you literally play chess in DMC3. The Blood Goyle is annoying because you have to shoot them and turn them to stone first before killing them. If you attack them normally, they'll just split in 2. Fighting enemies in a methodical way like this isn't fun. The Arachne are okay. They have a decent number of moves to put up a challenge, but I really wish you could launch them up into the air. Keeping them grounded limits combat potential. The Dullahan sucks because he has a shield that spins and blocks attacks from the front. The only way to beat him is to get behind him with a melee weapon. He can't be comboed and nothing interesting can be done with him. He's just a nuisance. The Soul Eater forces you to look the opposite direction to fight it, which is super tedious and annoying, especially when you're trying to focus on other enemies and they come out of the blue and either attack you or drain your Devil Trigger. The Fallen sucks with Dante since they fly around and you can't break their shield with guns. You can teleport to them with Trickster, but since Swordmaster isn't equipped, you can't air combo them properly. And if you do equip Swordmaster, then you don't have a reliable way to get to them like Trickster. With Vergil, it somewhat works because he has both trick and air attacks with Yamato, so this enemy works with one character and sucks with the other one. The Abyss is really cool. It's basically Sloth with more moves and health, so he's fun to fight, and has just as much combo potential. So, if you've been keeping track, there are 15 enemy types in this game, and only 4 of them are good. 1 of them is okay and 10 of them suck. Luckily, a lot of the encounters in the game are with the good enemies, but there are also a lot with the annoying ones, and it can really dampen my enjoyment of the game sometimes when facing these guys. So yeah, the enemy design isn't great either. But what about the bosses? Well, they suck too. Cerberus is a reactionary boss, and its attacks are easily dodgeable, and beating him mostly just comes down to using a set strategy. Gigapede is a joke. You just stand on top of it and melee him. His attacks are a joke too. Like, did anyone working on this game find this boss challenging? Jester is a special edition boss, and he also sucks. He just runs through a series of attacks that can be easily dodged. Agni and Rudra are pretty good, but they mostly spam the same attacks, which makes them a bit too easy to deal with. Plus, if you have Cerberus, then parrying them is really easy. But overall, I'd say they're pretty good. Heart of Leviathan just has you smack things whilst other enemies attack. Navan is cool. She is technically a reactionary boss, but it never feels that way, because she's always moving around and being proactive, responding to your attacks and where you are. Plus the attacks are awesome and fun to dodge, whilst also punishing you for not reacting quick enough. Beowulf is fun because he's a proactive boss. He has a variety of attacks that deal serious damage, and every style in the game provides a different experience of fighting him, and all are valid. The horse is boring because it just runs in circles until you kill it. Lady sucks because she keeps using the same attack the whole fight, and thus there's no variety to stop it from getting stale. Doppelganger has you smack lights and then smack him when he gets in the light. It's just really tedious and boring. Arkham is annoying because the hitboxes on his attack aren't good, and thus they won't hit you most of the time. Halfway through the fight, Vergil joins you, and you can't use DT or whatever style you previously had, and the boss does become somewhat challenging, but only because the game is arbitrarily limiting you. Although a cool feature on PlayStation 2 is that if you plug another controller in, the other player will control Vergil in this fight. Same with Doppelganger. So this game has some minor co-op features. Which leaves Vergil. Vergil is not only the best boss in the game, but he's one of the greatest ever made. He's fast and brutal while still having enough space in between attacks to allow the player to get a hit in, and he'll take a break from time to time to mock you, which gives you a chance to get your bearings. His attacks mirror yours, and you feel like you're fighting another player because of how similar he fights to you. All styles offer unique experience, there are multiple ways to fight him, multiple attacks to get used to, has multiple stages to keep things fresh, and he does an enormous amount of damage and is super fast. So he not only provides a challenge, but allows the player to experiment in fighting him in whatever way they choose. The final boss of DMC3 is one of the hardest, non-optional boss fights of any video game ever made, and it's also one of the best. I find it so strange that the game that has mostly shit boss fights can also have one of the greatest ever made. Beowulf and Navan are cool, and Agni and Rudra is okay, but Vergil steals the show. However, it doesn't really stop the rest of the bosses from being boring or shit. There are 13 bosses in this game, 15 if you count each Vergil fight as a different fight, which I do, because each fight with him is different. Then the game only has 6 good boss fights, 3 of which are with the same damn character. So only around a third of the boss fights are any good in this game. The rest of them suck. And those are my main criticisms with Devil May Cry 3. Mechanically, the game is pretty much perfect, but in every other aspect from level design, enemy design, and boss design, the game varies hugely in quality. Most of the game is the great stuff where you fight awesome enemies using awesome weapons, but there is quite a bit of annoying stuff in the game too. None of it outright ruins the experience, but it's why, despite how awesome and fun this game is, I can't call it a masterpiece. Another criticism is the mission ranking system. Just like Devil May Cry 1 and 2, the game gives you an overall rank for each mission. The game takes into account the time taken to beat the level, how many orbs you collected, stylish points, damage taken, and items used. This sucks because the damage and orb categories are annoying to deal with. You have to go and explore the levels looking for red orbs, or farm red orbs to get enough orbs in that category. Damage taken is annoying because it means that if you take too much damage, then poof goes your S rank. In a game like Bayonetta, which is about perfect dodges and dodge offsets, the game marking you down for taking damage makes sense. Plus, you have a dedicated dodge button in that game, so if you take damage, it's your fault. In DMC3 though, the only thing close to a dodge button is Trickster, and I guess Royal Guard for a block button. But even then, it's really stupid to say that if the player takes too much damage, then they don't deserve the S rank. I much prefer the ranking systems in 4 and 5 because you can take as much damage as you want, and it won't negate the S rank. Damage shouldn't negate an S rank in a Devil May Cry game, especially when you don't always have defensive options. In Bayonetta, you'll always have at bare minimum the dodge button. In DMC3, you don't. So it should be completely okay for the player to take damage. Plus, you have Devil Trigger, and part of the fun of Devil Trigger is tanking through damage. Besides, you already have the style system, which encourages the player to avoid damage, because if they take damage, then the meter goes down, and you need stylish points to get S ranks. I do think if the player dies, they should be punished for it, or if they take no damage, they should be rewarded, but I don't think damage taken should be an overall factor in your overall rank at the end of a level. Neither should orb collecting. I just want to play the game, I don't care about smashing objects in the environment to get orbs. This is why DMC5's ranking system is the best, because it only factors in how good you are at the combat and removes all the bullshit categories from previous games. So yeah, DMC3's ranking system is bad. You basically have to be perfect at the game to get S ranks. Especially on DMD, where if you take any damage at all, it's an instant A rank in that category. However, there is a lot of cool stuff in this game, like Turbo Mode, which speeds up the game by 20% and makes the action more intense. There are different costumes to use as well. And there is Bloody Palace from DMC2, in which you go through 9,999 floors in increasing difficulty. It's fun, but I don't think it needed to be that many floors, which is why in future games it's only 101 floors, with a timer. There are also extra difficulty modes which make the game even more challenging than it already is. So yeah, this game has plenty of replay value. Overall, Devil May Cry 3's gameplay is great. The combat mechanics are some of the best in the genre, but the game does fall apart in other areas such as the enemy, boss, and level design. These aspects don't ruin the game, but it can make it not fun sometimes. But overall, the gameplay is still amazing. One of the many misconceptions with the Devil May Cry series is that the story is bad or has no thought put into it, which is a shame because it's straight up wrong, and one of the strongest points of the series is its story. Now, DMC1's story is rather basic and there's not much to it. DMC2 is DMC2.
A false coin for a false god.
But DMC3 is something very different from the previous games. Bingo Morohashi was brought on board as the scenario writer for the game, and he did not disappoint. DMC3 contains some of the best characters, like, ever. Dante has become one of the most beloved video game protagonists of all time, and it's because of this game. Don't get me wrong, he was still cool as hell in DMC1, but DMC3 Dante is just unbelievable. Dante defined what an action game hero should be like, and to this day, only one other character from another series has been able to reach Dante's level in terms of cool action and awesome one-liners. Dante is just so cool. He fights demons with a constant smirk and cocky attitude, he eats pizza whilst doing so, he makes fun of demons with godlike powers.
Leave now, mortal! The likes of you are forbidden in this land! You who are powerless are not worthy to set foot here!
Wow, I've never seen a talking mud before. You know, in a dog show, you'd definitely take first place.
You ugly human make a mockery of me?
Easy, Fido. How about I take you out for a walk? Come on, puppy. Let's go.
You'll regret this, you worm!
He kills demons with an electric guitar, he uses a motorcycle as a sword, he taunts enemies mid-battle to show off how easy they are for him, he rides enemies like skateboards, he's so fucking cool. And I think this is one of the reasons Dante has stayed king of the action game protagonist, because he really plays into that power fantasy of being the coolest guy in the world. But I don't think that's the only thing that makes this character one of the best. While all of this would be enough to make Dante an awesome character and a great protagonist for the player, the journey he goes on is what makes him who he is. One of my favourite moments in the game is the ending cutscene inside the DMC shop. You can tell just how much Dante has matured just from the visuals alone. Throughout the game, Dante dresses like what a teenager's idea of a cool guy is, and during the ending cutscene, he's wearing the DMC-1 outfit, which is better dressed. You can also see that the shop is maturely arranged and that he kept the glove Vergil cut as a reminder to what can happen to him if he strays away from his humanity. At the beginning of the game, Dante is the only character who has no reason to be in the story. Vergil is here because he's trying to obtain Sparta's power, Arkham is here to backstab Vergil and take the power for himself, and Lady is here to stop her father. The only reason Dante even cares about the Timmy Negru is because he hates Vergil.
I just don't like you, that's all.
He doesn't care about Vergil trying to open a demonic portal, or Lady, or about anything else. He just wants to fight his brother because he's a dickhead. Which is why Dante loses in the first fight in the game, because he has no real motivation to fight Vergil. But Vergil steals his amulet, which is the only thing left of their deceased mother, and Dante clearly cares a lot about his mother by the fact that he's always wearing it.
Did he have it?
Of course. He's taking good care of it. After all, it is the only memento left from the mother you both lost.
But he has no idea of its true power.
So now he's going to fight Vergil to get it back. He also unlocks his demon side and gets Devil Trigger to fight Vergil. Now Dante has reason to be in the story beyond just not liking Vergil and wanting to sort things out with him. He's taken the only thing left of their mother. However, the more time he spends with Lady, the more he understands his true purpose, as said in this scene.
Why do you care so much?
This whole business started with my father sealing the entrance between the two worlds. And now, my brother's trying to break that spell and turn everything into Demonville. This is my family matter, too. Quite frankly, at first, I didn't give a damn. But because of you, I know what's important now. I know what I need to do.
Vergil and Arkham are trying to obtain demonic power to become more powerful, and in doing so, forget or completely lose their human side. But for Dante, he had Lady to remind him of his human side, and not to stray away from it. Which is interesting considering this line.
Why do you refuse to gain power? The power of our father, Sparta.
Father? I don't have a father.
Dante was trying to push away his demon side because his mother was killed by the demon Mundus, and so he grew a hatred towards demons, and even rejected his father because he was a demon. But he comes to learn that the only way to defeat Vergil and keep the human world safe is to embrace his demonic side. Dante goes from not giving a shit about anything besides fighting his brother, to fighting his brother to keep the human world safe. You can tell in the final cutscenes that Dante doesn't want to fight or kill Vergil. You can tell he still cares about his brother and that he doesn't want things to end this way. But if that's what needs to happen, then that's what needs to happen.
We are the sons of Sparta. Within each of us flows his blood. But more importantly, his soul! And now, my soul is saying it wants to stop you!
Unfortunately, our souls are at odds, brother. I need more power.
And the game doesn't need words to convey Dante's emotions in this scene. He just lost the only family he had left. Dante has become a beloved character not just because he's cool, but because he also has one of the most interesting character arcs in any action game. And Ruben Langdon's performance as this character is perfect. I couldn't imagine a better actor playing him.
Look, brother, it's been ages, but we finally have company. I see that. We must entertain our guest. You're right. We have to be gracious hosts. What should we do? How do I know? We need to come up with something. Brother, our guest is sighing. Sigh? What is sigh? Well, a sigh is when...
Enough already! How long are you two gonna keep carrying on like this? In case you didn't get the hint, I'll spell it out. You're a guest. Wants to go through. Got it?
Vergil is one of the best accomplishments with Devil May Cry 3. The team had to create a rival character to Dante that was just as cool as him, but was also nothing like him at all in either story or gameplay. And they succeeded with flying colors. If Dante redefined the action game hero, Vergil redefined the action game rival. Look at almost any action game after Devil May Cry 3, and you'll notice they tried to recapture Vergil. But Vergil still remains the king in that category. I mean, the way he's introduced is so awesome. The tower rises out of the ground with Vergil standing on top of it, and then the Hell Vanguard goes to the top and Vergil kills him in one sword slash. Keeping in mind that this is an enemy which countless players die to a lot on their first try. So for a first time player, their first impression of Vergil is this: he effortlessly kills an enemy you struggled to beat. And even if you're really good at the game and manage to kill the Hell Vanguard easily, then this cutscene still works as it shows that Vergil is just as good as you. Vergil's appearance and personality also highlights the similarities and differences between him and Dante. Both wear long coats, but Dante's is a messy biker coat, whereas Vergil's is sleek and elegant. Dante's hair is let down and is soft, whereas Vergil's is upwards and is more angular. Vergil's coat is blue, Dante's coat is red. Dante's sword Rebellion is a large and wide sword that relies on heavy strikes, whereas Vergil has a katana that is slim and focuses on precision. Dante is a goofball, whereas Vergil is serious and toned down. These two couldn't be more polar opposite if they tried, and yet the things that make them different is what keeps connecting them. Vergil's design perfectly represents the character he is, and it's why his design has stayed pretty much the same over the course of the series. Even in 5, it's the same design, it's just a color switch. I also love Dan Southworth's performance. Apparently he had a cold whilst recording Vergil's lines, and it gave a perfect nasally voice to Vergil. It makes him sound kinda nerdy, which fits.
Why isn't this working? Is there something missing? Must more blood be shed?
But it's not too nasally to the point where he doesn't sound cool.
You showed up.
You sure know how to throw a party. No food, no drinks, and the only babe just left.
My sincerest apology, brother. I was so eager to see you, I couldn't concentrate on preparations for the bash.
Whatever. At any rate, it's been a whole year since we last met. How about a kiss from your little brother? Or better yet, how about a kiss from this? So, this is what they call a heartwarming family reunion, eh?
You got that right.
Another detail that sells the idea of Vergil being your rival is the Beowulf scene. In DMC3, you gain weapons based on the demons you fight, but when you beat Beowulf, he smacks you and runs away. Vergil encounters him, kills him easily, and then takes the weapon for himself. First off, this motivates the player to beat Vergil even more, because he stole your well-deserved weapon like a prick. Second off, Vergil is obtaining weapons the same way you do. Dante kills demons and gets their weapons and has a cool cutscene showing off the weapon, and Vergil does the same with Beowulf. It really helps give the idea that Vergil is your rival because his rules are consistent with yours. What I also love is that during the second boss fight, Vergil is so cocky and sure he can beat you that he decides to put away Yamato and get some practice with Beowulf. But halfway through the fight, he realizes that he's losing, so he brings out Yamato. It's a great example of storytelling through gameplay. It adds a second phase to the boss to make the gameplay more interesting, and shows off that Vergil was in over his head when he thought he could beat you even though you've become more powerful. What makes Vergil such a great parallel to Dante is that unlike Dante, who has a character arc and changes throughout the game, Vergil is static and doesn't change. He wants to obtain Sparta's power for himself, and in doing so forgets his human side in his pursuit of power. He loses the final fight because he fails to accept both sides of himself, and the after credits scene shows him going to fight Mundus, which leads into DMC 1 with Nello Angelo.
It'll be fun to fight with the Prince of Darkness. If my father did it, I should be able to do it too.
Another cool detail in this cutscene is that Vergil throws away the sheath of Yamato. In Japanese culture, throwing away the sheath of your sword indicated that this was your final battle. So Vergil already has an idea of how this battle is going to go, but he still fights Mundus regardless. Vergil also helped structure the game into 3 acts, and each fight with him clearly marks the end of each act of the game's story. Vergil is an amazing rival character to Dante, but he's also great in his own right, with his own stylish action and one-liners. In fact, Vergil's dialogue is the most memorable in the game, and I find it really cool that Vergil became just as iconic and memorable as Dante, despite having only one game to flesh out his character until DMZ5. Dante had 2 games previously and another one afterwards to flesh him out, and Vergil still remained on par with him with just this game. But the character that ties this story together is Lady. Lady is here to kill her father because he killed her mother in the pursuit of demonic power, and because of this, she shares some similarities with Dante. In the beginning of the game, she hates all demons and even hates Dante because he is one, saying that he doesn't understand her simply because of it.
Well, we have something in common. I have a dysfunctional family too.
And what would you know about family? You're a demon. This is my father. My family. This was all supposed to end by my hand.
When, in fact, Dante's the only one here who can understand her. This is a family matter, and it involves Dante just as much as it does her. She wants revenge, but she's also very conflicted, as shown in this scene.
What horrible thing have I done? I was too weak. I succumbed to his influence.
You mean you were possessed? Father?
Yes, I was manipulated. Manipulated by a devil named Vergil.
Vergil?
She desperately wants to believe that the father she loved still exists when he doesn't, which is why she gets manipulated by him so easily. And also, like Dante, she's only in this for personal reasons. Lady isn't here because of how the tower and a portal to the demonic world will affect the populace. She's here because her father is an awful person, and as a child, she thinks that she takes responsibility in cleaning up her father's mess. Similar to how Dante's responsibility of stopping the demonic portal mirrors what his father did. But even when Dante offers to take care of her father, and even though he's much more qualified for the job, she refuses because it's her responsibility. It's only after seeing who Dante really is that she gives that responsibility up. She sees that Dante isn't an evil demon. He's someone with a heart that cares a lot about his family, the same way Lady cares about hers and her mother. From this, she learns that the situation isn't as black and white as human good, demon bad. In fact, at the end of the game, she seems to associate human emotions with demons far more than Dante does.
Are you crying?
It's only the rain.
The rain already stopped.
The devils never cry.
I see. Maybe somewhere out there, even a devil may cry when he loses a loved one. Don't you think?
Maybe.
And it's why Dante learns his responsibility as a devil hunter from her. He shouldn't hunt demons because he hates them. He should hunt them to keep the world safe and make sure people don't have to experience what him and Lady experienced. Arkham is also a great villain. He's a despicable person with no redeeming qualities. He kills and manipulates people for his own selfish gain, and he does all this while being less powerful than the people he faces. My favourite part is that his demon side is a clown, just to show how much of an idiot he is.
Don't be a bad girl, Mary. Or you can expect a spanking from Daddy later. Just as gonna spank you, but spank you on the
Insane
butt.
buffoon! I don't know where you came from, but you don't belong here.
Now leave! Zowie, that was close. But you've taken quite a trouncing today, haven't you, Vergil? You could have chopped me into confetti by now if you were in tip-top condition.
Damn you!
You have lost.
Because you underestimated humans.
Arkham is the type of person Dante could become, and what Vergil was going to become. Both want the same thing and constantly backstab each other to get it, which makes for an interesting dynamic. What I also love is that this game acts as the perfect prequel to Devil May Cry 1. If you replay Devil May Cry 1 after playing Devil May Cry 3, there's a lot of details in that game that you'll respect after playing this game, and it'll add more to the story. So, Devil May Cry 3 has amazing characters that tell an amazing story. I don't know where the misconception of this game having a bad or lackluster story came from. Maybe it's because people only give attention to stories that tackle deep stuff, but even then, DMC3 tackles deep themes about family, morality, and responsibility. So I'm not sure. It's definitely a misconception that drives me insane, because anyone going into this game isn't going to pay attention to the story because everyone else says it's shit, and thus they won't deem it as important, and they won't experience the greatness of the story in this game. And it's not just this game either. The action genre doesn't seem to get as much appreciation for its storytelling, despite having games like Devil May Cry 3, Bayonetta 1 and 2, Metal Gear Rising, or Nier Automata. It's an ideology I wish stopped because it's going to make people miss out on some awesome stories, all because it's from a genre that, for whatever reason, is associated with shit storytelling. There's plenty of great games in this genre with great stories and great characters. Anyway, Devil May Cry 3 has a terrific story, with awesome characters, dialogue and cutscenes, and tackles a lot of interesting themes along the way, while still being popcorn fun. One thing the series has always been great at is the soundtrack. Even DMC2 had great music. DMC3's soundtrack is great. The in-game battle music is the perfect pace for the speed of the combat, and has the perfect intensity thanks to Shooty HG's awesome voice. The boss themes are really awesome too, and all unique. Cerberus' theme is probably my favourite due to the lyrics. But I also love themes like Beowulf, Navan, Agni and Rudra, or Ladies theme. Of course, though, the best boss themes come from Vergil. Vergil's second theme is my favourite because of how it perfectly fits the character. The track is mostly orchestral, which captures the elegance of Vergil, but it also has some guitars to capture the edge and angst of the character. I love the after credits theme as well. It's somber in the same way Dante feels somber after losing the last of his family. Of course, though, what video would be complete without Devils Never Cry? This is both Dante's and Lady's theme and fits both characters. Shooty HG's voice fits Dante's demon side, whereas the vocals by David Butler fit the human aspect of Lady. And at the end of the song, both play together to represent both characters' journeys throughout the game. So overall, the soundtrack is awesome. In conclusion, Devil May Cry 3 is an awesome game. While the levels, the enemies and the bosses aren't all that great, some being outright terrible, the combat mechanics are more than enough to make up for that. Plus the game has an awesome story that tackles interesting themes and poses questions to the player, like if they're responsible for their family's wrongdoings, and how much responsibility they have in cleaning that up. And it has a kick-ass soundtrack alongside all that. Plus, the game is highly replayable with new modes and costumes. There's also the Switch port, which allows Bloody Palace co-op and a freestyle mode, though that can also be added into the PC version via mods. All in all, DMC3 defined what a Devil May Cry game is, and is the reason this series is even still a thing, and it redefined the entire action game genre. It more than deserves the title of legendary.
Yearning more to kill the soul forever. Rough a demon as I put it